Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're really zeroing in on the C1 English learner. So if you're out there, functioning well in English, understanding complex stuff, doing your job.
Right. You're competent. People get what you're saying.
Exactly. But maybe you've got this little itch, this feeling that something's not quite clicking perfectly.
That's it. You've climbed the big mountains, the foundational stuff. You're respected. Your vocab is decent.
Yeah.
But there's that subtle kind of nagging sense that maybe the real nuance gets lost sometimes.
Or that your personality, the one you have in your native language, feels a bit watered down.
Diluted, yeah. Conversations feel
Okay.
just adequate.
That adequacy, that's the gap we're talking about today, isn't it?
Precisely. It's the difference between the English you can use, which gets the job done.
And the English you want to use.
Yeah.
The elegant, powerful, really expressive kind.
The kind that feels truly you.
So if you're feeling that tension, that friction, then stick around. You're in the right place.
We're doing a deep dive today into something that might sound, well, a bit upside down.
Go on.
We're arguing that if you're at this advanced C1 level, your main focus shouldn't be polishing what you already do well.
Okay.
It should be, counterintuitively perhaps, to relentlessly, actively seek out your weaknesses, expose them.
Right. So our mission today is basically treat every slip-up, every awkward moment, every time you hesitate.
Not as failure, not at all.
But as data.
Yeah.
Precious, critical data points.
Exactly. They're like coordinates on a map showing you exactly where your next breakthrough is waiting.
Okay, I like that. So today we're exploring the three main areas, the frontiers, where these limits tend to hide.
We'll give you some diagnostic tools, kind of like linguistic metal detectors, to find them.
We've got some really compelling stories, real-world examples of learners who actually use their mistakes, their imperfections.
As their roadmap, their map to real mastery.
Fantastic. Let's get into it. Part one. We need to talk about escaping the tyranny of the comfort zone. So the C1 plateau, it's comfortable, right?
Yeah.
It's seductive.
Oh, absolutely. You can navigate daily life, work, social situations, mostly without major issues.
You communicate effectively, you're understood. Serious misunderstandings are rare. You can function.
You really can. And the temptation to just settle there, to coast.
It's huge. So why is settling for good enough, actually?
Yeah.
Well, maybe the worst thing an advanced learner can do.
Because fundamentally, it guarantees you stop growing. It guarantees stagnation.
Oh, okay.
And this stagnation, it creeps in three specific, quite insidious ways. The first one is what we call the illusion of competence.
The illusion of competence.
Right.
Now, tell me more about that. How does that work?
Well, think about your passive skills, your reading and listening. At C1, these are often way ahead, like sprinting ahead of your active skills, speaking and writing.
Right. I can understand almost everything I hear or read.
Exactly. You can listen to a fast-paced news debate, read a dense article about, economics or science, and get maybe 95% of it.
And that feels great. It tells my brain, hey, I've got this language down.
It does, but that understanding is passive. It's
Yeah.
decoding what someone else has constructed.
Ah, okay. It's not building something yourself.
Precisely. Understanding is like recognizing the ingredients in a fancy dish. Production is actually cooking that dish perfectly from scratch, maybe while the kitchen's on fire.
Ah, okay. Good analogy.
So you might follow every intricate point in a sophisticated political discussion on TV.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the real, sometimes uncomfortable, test. Could you actually jump into that debate live, unscripted?
With the same level of complexity, using those nuanced arguments, those
Yes.
conditional clauses.
Exactly. With the same rhetorical force and speed, if you only ever practice speaking within your existing comfort zone, that gap between what you understand and what you can actually produce,
It stays hidden, and it never shrinks.
it never closes. And that hidden gap, that illusion, it directly feeds the second big problem.
Which our sources call the fossilization of errors. Sounds ominous.
It's a nightmare for advanced learners, truly. We're talking about those subtle, persistent mistakes.
Things that maybe don't break communication completely.
That's the key. They're often grammatical. Maybe you consistently misuse articles like a and the or certain prepositions. Or they could be phonological, a specific vowel sound you just can't quite nail consistently, like the sheep difference.
Or lexical, like using a word that's almost right, but not quite the perfect fit, the right collocation.
Yes. And because these errors don't cause a total communication breakdown.
People often don't correct you.
Yeah.
Especially native speakers. They might just understand you anyway.
Exactly. Politeness or just the flow of conversation means they slide. But every time you use that slightly incorrect form within your comfortable speaking patterns,
You're reinforcing it.
yeah,
You're strengthening that wrong pathway in your brain.
it becomes hardwired, like a well-worn path through a forest. Your brain found an easy enough, slightly wrong way to say something ages ago.
And now it just defaults to that path.
It does, because using the correct, maybe slightly more complex structure requires effort. It requires friction, conscious thought.
And without deliberately pushing yourself outside that comfort zone where those errors might actually get noticed or feel wrong.
They just cement themselves. They become part of your permanent English. Fossilized, unmovable habits.
Okay, so the illusion of competence hides the passive-active gap, and fossilization locks in the errors. What's the third trap?
If we only ever talk about familiar things, we fall into what the material calls the echo chamber of your own English.
Right. I talk about my job, my hobbies, my family.
Exactly. Your professional field, maybe your specific interests, your daily routine, if that's the boundary of your English usage.
I'm only using a tiny fraction of the whole language.
You become incredibly fluent, maybe even brilliant, within your specific, predictable English bubble.
Master of my niche.
Master of your niche, absolutely. Fluent in the language of, say, software development or marketing strategy or Renaissance art.
But then the conversation shifts.
To something unexpected, something outside that bubble. Abstract philosophy, maybe. Or the detailed mechanics of a car engine. Or a current cultural trend you haven't followed.
Suddenly I seize up.
You might revert to simpler sentences, stammer a bit, struggle for words. You might be a wizard with financial reports, but if someone asks you to, I don't know, explain the core principles of quantum entanglement.
I'm back to sounding like an intermediate learner, maybe.
Potentially. Because you haven't practiced navigating that unpredictable linguistic territory. You haven't built the vocabulary or the structures for it.
So escaping this tyranny of comfort requires a pretty fundamental mindset shift then.
It really does. The core idea, the absolute key, is to start seeing every moment of confusion, every awkward pause, every word you don't know.
Not as a failure.
Not as a failure, but as a precious data point. A gift, almost.
Okay. It's information.
It's crucial information. It's like a pin dropping on the map of your limitations, an X marking the spot.
Showing you exactly where you need to dig next, where the treasure is buried.
Precisely. You shift your entire focus from just practicing what you already know, from reinforcing your strength.
To actively, intentionally seeking out the edges, the frontiers of your current ability.
That's the mission. Finding the frontier.
Okay, so we accept the mission. We need to seek discomfort. But my limits sounds a bit vague. How do we get specific?
That's the next step. Realizing that these limitations aren't just one big blob of not good enough. They exist in 3 distinct domains, 3 frontiers.
And knowing which frontier you're facing is crucial, right? Because the strategy to tackle each one is different.
Totally different. Using the wrong tool on the wrong gap is just wasted effort, especially at this level where time is precious.
Okay, let's map out this framework. Frontier number 1.
This is probably the most obvious one. It's the actual stuff, the words, the concepts, the cultural context that you simply haven't learned yet.
So things like very topic-specific vocabulary, like I wouldn't know the words to discuss, say, boat maintenance or particle physics off the top of my head.
Exactly. The detailed lexicon for specialized fields. But it's broader than just technical terms.
Okay.
It also includes cultural literacy. This is huge. All those idioms, the slang that comes and goes, proverbs, subtle jokes, pop culture references.
The stuff native speakers just absorb by living in the culture.
Right. And missing these isn't just missing words. It's missing the subtext, the layers of meaning in a conversation.
And you mentioned a third component here, often overlooked.
Yes. And it's critical for C1 learners aiming for high-level communication. The formal register.
Meaning.
The specific, nuanced, often quite structured language needed for formal situations. Think high-stakes business negotiations, academic writing, delivering a eulogy, making a formal complaint, addressing a committee.
Language that carries a certain weight and follows specific conventions.
Precisely. It's a knowledge gap if you don't know those conventions or the specific vocabulary associated with them.
Okay, so this frontier is vast. How do we even begin to find the edges? What are the diagnostic tools?
One really effective tool is the Topic Storm Challenge.
Sounds intense.
It can be. You need a willing language partner, a teacher, maybe even just a list of challenging prompts. The idea is they throw random, unfamiliar topics at you.
The key being unfamiliar, outside my usual echo chamber.
Absolutely critical. Don't talk about your job again. Get them to ask you things like, explain the main causes of the 2008 financial crisis in simple terms, or describe how a sewing machine actually works, or what are the core philosophical ideas of Stoicism and why are people talking about them now?
Wow. Okay, so the goal isn't necessarily to be factually correct about Stoicism.
Not primarily. The goal is to record yourself attempting it and then listen back carefully. You're listening for the linguistic breakdown points.
Where do I stammer? Where does my grammar suddenly become really basic?
Exactly. And crucially, listen for circumlocution. That's when you talk around a word or concept because you don't have the precise term.
It's that,
Yeah.
that thing you use with the wires for eggs instead of whisk.
Spot on. Listen for those vague placeholder stuff, thingy, that whole situation. Every time you rely on vague language, that's a pinpointed knowledge gap. You lacked the specific noun, verb, or adjective.
That's a really practical way to find vocabulary gaps. What about the cultural and rhetorical gaps?
For that, another great diagnostic is to watch a panel show or debate, but watch it differently.
How so?
Use something like the BBC's Question Time, or maybe Intelligence Squared debates, or even high-quality political commentary shows. You're not just passively absorbing the content, you're actively listening for your gaps.
What am I noting down?
Every cultural reference you don't get, every historical allusion that goes over your head, every bit of sarcasm or irony or passive aggression that you only register a few seconds late.
So it's about the speed of processing that cultural subtext.
Exactly. That lag in understanding the implied meaning, the tone, the cultural shortcut, that's a knowledge gap that needs mapping if you want to operate at native-like levels in those kinds of discussions.
Okay, Frontier 2. This one sounds particularly frustrating. The performance gap.
It really is, because this is about the disconnect between what you know passively, what you recognize when you read or hear it, and what you can actually produce actively, spontaneously, especially under pressure.
It's the gap between understanding the recipe and actually cooking the dish, like you said.
Precisely. This is where those fossilized errors love to hang out. They emerge when you're speaking quickly or not concentrating fully.
So components here would be things like knowing the rule for the third conditional, but messing it up in a fast conversation.
Classic example. You can explain the rule perfectly, maybe even ace a grammar quiz on it, but in the heat of a real discussion, it just doesn't come out right. Or maybe it doesn't come out at all.
And pronunciation issues fit here too. Like, I know the difference between ship and sheep. I can hear it clearly.
But when you're talking naturally, maybe excitedly, that distinction blurs. Your mouth doesn't quite make the right shape consistently.
Yeah, that inconsistency is a performance issue.
Definitely. And another huge one here is active vocabulary. You read a word like ubiquitous or ephemeral, you know what it means.
I understand it in context.
But does it ever actually appear in your own speaking or writing? Or does it stay locked away in your passive memory banks, never quite making it out when you need it?
That's a big one for me, definitely. So how do we diagnose this gap between knowing and doing?
The ultimate diagnostic tool here is powerful, maybe a bit painful, but incredibly revealing. Record and transcribe your spontaneous speech.
Oof, verbatim.
Every single one.
The source material is clear. You will likely be both horrified and enlightened by the process.
Mine horrified.
Because the gap between how fluent you think you sound in your head and the raw, messy reality of your actual spoken output can be stark.
Okay, so I record myself talking for, say, 2 minutes on a complex topic, maybe one I struggled with in the Topic Storm Challenge.
Good idea. Then you sit down and type it out exactly as you said it, no cleaning it up. You have to become a cold, objective analyst of your own linguistic data. What specific things am I looking for in that transcript? What should I mark up?
You're looking for patterns of breakdown. Use a simple coding system. Maybe A for abandoned sentences where you started an idea and just trailed off.
Happens all the time.
Art for repetitions or reliance on the same filler words or phrases over and over. U for idiomatic phrasing, grammatically okay, maybe, but just sounds off, unnatural to a native ear.
And G for obvious grammar mistakes, especially those fossilized ones like articles or verb tenses that you know are wrong that keep making.
Exactly. That transcript becomes your map. It shows the measurable distance between your fluent internal intention and your sometimes halting external production. That's your performance gap quantified.
Wow. Okay, that's the big diagnostic. Any other tools for this frontier?
Yes, to specifically target those hidden vocabulary gaps, the words you know but don't use, try implementing the no circumlocution rule during practice.
So I ban myself from talking around words.
In a dedicated practice session, yes. Forbid vague language. No thingy, no stuff. If you're trying to describe making breakfast and you can't remember the word spatula,
I can't say that flat thing for flipping eggs.
correct. You must either pause, actively retrieve the word spatula, or describe it with painstaking precision. A kitchen utensil with a broad, flat, flexible blade used for lifting and flipping food items.
Okay, that pressure forces the passive vocabulary into active use.
It drags those dormant words out into the light. It makes the gap painfully obvious and forces you to bridge it in the moment.
All right, frontier 3. This sounds the deepest, maybe the trickiest, the identity gap.
It often is. It's the most subtle, arguably the most profound. It's about the difference between the person you are in your native language and the person you feel you can be or can't be in English.
So it's about expressing your full personality.
Exactly. The components here are things like, maybe you're naturally witty or sarcastic in your first language, but in English, that side of you just doesn't come across. You feel flat, serious.
Or perhaps you're really good at building quick, informal rapport in your native culture, charming people, maybe even flirting, but in English you feel awkward, stiff, purely functional.
That's a huge one. And professionally, it can manifest as an inability to command a room, to persuade with passion, or to argue your case with the same force and authority you know you possess.
Your English self feels like a less confident, less charismatic, less impactful version of your true self.
Precisely. But we need to be careful here, inject a bit of nuance. People sometimes confuse this identity gap with just, well, cultural differences in humor or interaction styles.
Right. How do I know if it's the language holding my personality back versus just, say, my joke's not landing well in a different cultural context? Or maybe I'm just naturally quieter in international groups.
That's the crucial distinction. The diagnostic question isn't, am I funny in English? It's, do I possess the linguistic tools in English to even attempt the kind of humor I use naturally?
Ah, okay. So if my native humor relies heavily on clever wordplay or very specific cultural puns.
And you simply don't have that sophisticated vocabulary or cultural knowledge base in English yet, then yes, that's a language gap suppressing your identity. You lack the tools for that specific performance.
Makes sense. So how do we diagnose this? The tools must be more social, right?
They are. The first is social benchmarking.
Which means?
Taking an honest look at your typical role in a relaxed social setting in your native language. Are you the storyteller, the one who asks deep questions, the witty observer making dry comments, the facilitator who brings people together?
Okay, identify my native social persona.
Then, consciously try to replicate that specific role in a similar setting in English. Observe the struggle. If you're a natural, engaging storyteller in Portuguese, weaving vivid narratives.
But in English, you find yourself just listing facts chronologically, feeling boring and disconnected.
That gap, that inability to perform your storytelling identity, pinpoints the limit. It's likely a combination of vocabulary, complex sentence structures, and perhaps confidence, a performance gap blocking your identity.
Got it. And the second diagnostic.
Analyze a disagreement. Think back to a recent time you had to disagree with someone or push back on an idea in English.
Especially maybe a higher stakes situation, work-related perhaps.
Ideally, yes. Ask yourself, did you manage to express the full nuance of your position? Did you convey your level of conviction accurately? Did your emotional tone match your internal feeling assertive rather than aggressive or passionate rather than just loud?
Compared to how I would have handled that same disagreement in my native language.
That's the benchmark. If you felt your English simplified your argument, made you sound less reasonable, less persuasive, or emotionally off compared to your native self,
Then the identity gap is showing. The language wasn't robust enough to carry the full weight of who you are and what you believe in that moment.
exactly. The words failed to fully represent the self.
Okay, these three frontiers, knowledge, performance, identity, provide a great framework. But it's still a bit abstract. Let's make it concrete with those case studies you mentioned.
Absolutely. We have 4 detailed examples from the source material of real learners who use this exact process of identifying and attacking their specific limits. These stories really highlight that finding the failure point is the start of the solution.
Let's hear them. Who's first?
Let's start with Anya, a diplomat from Poland. Her challenge was mapping the limit of persuasion. Hashtag 1. Anya, the diplomat, Poland, the limit of persuasion. Anya was highly competent, very successful in her role. But she had this nagging feeling. She felt she won arguments or negotiations primarily through intense preparation, overwhelming facts, solid logic.
Okay, sounds effective. What was the problem?
The problem was flexibility and spontaneity. When things went off script, when she had to react quickly or persuade someone emotionally, not just logically, her English felt rigid, mechanical almost. It lacked that fluid eloquence needed in high-stakes diplomatic situations.
So her limit was mainly a performance gap that was hindering her professional identity as a persuasive diplomat.
Exactly. She knew the facts, but couldn't deploy them with persuasive flair on the fly.
So how did she set about finding the specifics of this rigidity?
Yeah.
How did she get out of her safe, prepared remarks zone?
Her mission was quite clever. She started recording practice sessions, improvisational arguments with a language partner or coach.
Okay.
But here's the twist. She deliberately chose to argue for the opposite of her genuine opinion on controversial topics.
That was brilliant. Why?
Because it completely prevented her from falling back on her prepared facts and well-rehearsed positions. It forced her brain to generate arguments, justifications, and persuasive language entirely from scratch, in real time.
It's pure linguistic generation under pressure.
Yeah.
What did listening back to those recordings reveal? Where were her failure points?
The discovery was really insightful. Two main things. First, on a structural level, she found she relied heavily on just 3 or 4 very predictable rhetorical patterns to link her ideas or transition between points. Her arguments lacked variety and sophistication in their flow.
Okay, a limited toolkit. What was the second thing?
This was more damaging, especially for a diplomat. Her transcripts were littered with weak hedging phrases, constant use of I think, in my opinion, maybe, perhaps, I suppose.
Even when she was arguing forcefully for something?
Yes. Even when she felt certain, her language projected uncertainty and deference. It fundamentally undercut her authority. She realized she wasn't actually persuading, she was just stating facts, sometimes loudly, but without conviction baked into the language itself.
Wow. A huge leak in her professional persona due to a performance gap. So what was her strategy to fix it? How did she build that persuasive muscle?
It was about consciously building new linguistic habits, new muscle memory. Step 1 was actively replacing those weak, hedging phrases with more assertive, confident language. Instead of, I think this is the best option, she practiced using frames like, my assessment is that, or the evidence clearly points to, or our position must be.
Taking ownership of the statement.
Precisely. And step 2 was mastering specific, high-impact rhetorical devices common in persuasive English. She deliberately practiced using anaphora, repeating a key word or phrase at the beginning of successive clauses for emphasis.
Can you give a quick example of how she might have used that?
Sure. Instead of a flat statement like, we need to address the budget shortfall, improve efficiency, and rebuild trust, she might train herself to say, we must address this shortfall, we must drive efficiency improvements, we must rebuild the trust that has been lost. That repetition creates rhythm and hammers the point home.
Much more powerful.
Definitely. She also focused on the triclon, the power of 3, structuring key points or concluding thoughts in sets of 3 because, for whatever reason, that structure tends to land with more weight and finality in English rhetoric.
Government of the people, by the people, for the people, that kind of thing.
Exactly. She wasn't just learning vocabulary. She was learning the music of persuasive English and drilling it until it became natural.
Fascinating. Okay, who's next? #2. Kenji, the game developer, Japan.
The limit of humor. Next up is Kenji, a game developer from Japan. His story is a classic, almost painful example of an acute identity gap.
All right.
In Japanese, especially in his work environment, Kenji was known for his quick, dry, subtle wit. He had a reputation for clever banter.
But in English.
In English meetings or social situations with international colleagues, silence. He was perceived as the quiet, competent, serious guy. His entire humorous personality was locked away, inaccessible.
Well, that's tough. The fear of telling a joke in a second language and having it just land completely flat. Or worse, having to explain it. That must be a massive barrier.
It's incredibly high stakes socially, isn't it? The potential for awkwardness is huge. So Kenji's mission to find his limit was, frankly, terrifying for him.
What did he do?
He joined an online improvisation class, an improv class in English.
Wow, talk about jumping into the deep end. Improv is basically forced, unscripted communication and potential failure, constantly.
Exactly. It's a laboratory for exactly what he needed to confront. He described it as failing spectacularly week after week at first.
What did he learn from those failures? What was the root cause? Was it just not knowing funny words?
His big discovery was this. His attempts at humor were failing because he was trying to literally translate jokes, humorous concepts, or witty remarks directly from Japanese.
But humor rarely translates directly, does it?
Almost never perfectly. He was missing the cultural context, obviously, but even more importantly, he was missing the rhythm, the timing, the delivery style of English humor. He also realized he lacked cultural confidence, particularly with things like self-deprecation, which is a huge part of informal British and American humor, for example.
So it wasn't just about the words, but the whole performance package.
Totally. Each failed joke, each awkward silence in the improv class taught him something. He started noticing what kinds of lines got a genuine laugh versus a polite pity chuckle. He learned how to build on someone else's joke, how to use timing for effect.
That's the shift from just translating content to mastering the conversational dance.
Exactly. So his strategy became twofold. First, he became a really meticulous student of English comedy. He watched panel shows, stand-up specials, sitcoms, but not just for fun. He was analyzing them.
Breaking down the structure, the timing,
Mm.
the setup and punchline.
Yes. How long were the pauses? How did they use intonation? What were the common structures? Second, and maybe more importantly, he consciously stopped trying to tell pre-planned structured jokes in his practice conversations.
Yeah.
He focused on developing playful banter, light teasing, making quick, witty observations in the moment. He gave himself permission to try and fail, aiming for that spontaneous, connected humor rather than translated punchlines. He was finding a new English comedic voice that felt authentic to him, even if it was different from his Japanese one.
Finding an English version of his witty identity. Great story. Okay, third case. Hashtag 3. Chloe, a historian for France.
The limit of narrative.
Our third case is Chloe, a historian from France. Her challenge perfectly illustrates a performance gap that specifically impacted her ability to tell a compelling story. The limit of narrative. Okay, historian. So she could handle complex information.
Absolutely. She could write incredibly detailed, brilliant academic papers for her peers. Deep research, complex arguments, very sophisticated language.
So where was the gap?
The gap appeared when she needed to communicate her research to a non-specialist audience. Think undergraduate students, people at a public lecture, even colleagues from different fields. When explaining her work verbally, she became, well, convoluted, abstract, dense, and honestly, a bit boring.
Ah, the curse of knowledge. She couldn't translate her expertise into an engaging story.
Exactly. She had all the knowledge, no knowledge gap there, but she lacked the performance skill to transmit it in a way that hooked people, made them care, made them understand easily. A classic performance gap impacting her ability to connect.
So how did she go about diagnosing this? How did she pinpoint why her explanations were falling flat?
Her limit-finding mission involved starting a blog. She set herself the task of explaining complex historical events and concepts to a general readership, deliberately aiming for clarity, engagement, and using storytelling techniques.
Forcing herself into that narrative mode. What did she discover when she looked critically at her early attempts? Maybe transcribe some practice talks.
She said her early drafts and transcripts were, in her own words, a disaster of passive voice and abstract nouns. Just full of them.
Can you give an example?
Instead of saying something active and concrete like, the government mobilized the army, which disrupted society, she'd write or say things like, it can be argued that the mobilization was initiated by the state structure, thereby creating significant societal disruption.
Very academic, very impersonal, distanced.
Totally. She realized she was hiding behind the jargon, the complexity. Using passive voice and abstract nouns felt safer, more objective maybe, but it completely stripped the humanity and the narrative drive out of the history. Her limit was an inability to make the information feel alive, to humanize it.
So what strategy did she use to break free from that academic straitjacket and unlock her narrative voice?
She adopted a simple but powerful framework for structuring her explanations, one often used in screenwriting, actually. The, and, but therefore, ABT framework.
ABT. How does that work in explaining history?
Instead of just listing facts chronologically, fact A happened, fact B happened, fact C happened, the ABT structure forces a narrative logic. You state a fact or situation, and then you introduce another related element, but then you introduce a conflict, a problem, or a turning point. Therefore, this consequence or action followed.
So it forces a cause and effect dynamic.
Exactly. It turns static information into a mini-story with tension and resolution. For example, instead of, the crops failed, people starved, the king raised taxes, she might structure it as. The harvests were initially promising, and the kingdom expected prosperity, but then a sudden blight destroyed the crops. Therefore, the king, facing famine and unrest, made the fateful decision to raise taxes.
Instantly more engaging, creates flow and drama.
It forces you to use connecting words that signal relationship, conflict, and consequence, not just sequence. It helped her break the habit of abstract pronouncements and start telling historical stories.
Simple, but sounds incredibly effective. Okay, one more case study. Hashtag 4. Diego, a sales director, Argentina. The limit of empathy.
Our final case is Diego, a sales director from Argentina. He was naturally charismatic, high energy, fantastic at building relationships and closing deals in Spanish. A real people person.
Okay, sounds like a great salesperson. What happened in English?
In English, particularly during formal pitches or negotiations with international clients, the feedback was different. He came across as highly transactional. Efficient, yes, but also maybe a bit pushy, forceful, lacking warmth.
So his natural charisma wasn't translating, a critical identity gap, so maybe manifesting as a communication style issue.
Exactly. It wasn't that his English was inaccurate. Technically, he was fluent, but the relational aspect, the empathy, the connection that was missing, he was failing at relational fluency, even though his technical fluency was high.
That's a really subtle but potentially damaging gap in sales. How on earth did he get honest feedback on something so personal, like how he felt to clients?
His mission required real courage, real vulnerability. He started actively asking his international clients for feedback after the main business was concluded, whether they'd sign the deal or not.
What did he ask them?
He asked for blunt, confidential feedback, specifically on the interaction. Things like, how did our conversation feel to you? Did I come across as understanding your needs? Did I feel like a partner? Or more like just a vendor pushing a product?
Wow, it takes guts. What did that risky feedback reveal?
The discovery was surprisingly consistent. The main feedback, he talked too much. Way too much.
Really? Not that his accent was wrong or his grammar was bad.
No, he was so focused on delivering his perfectly prepared, data-rich pitch, hitting all his points, that he wasn't leaving space. He wasn't actively, demonstrably listening. And digging deeper, he had a realization. He was missing the English equivalents of the little Spanish connector, words and sounds he used constantly in Spanish, things like claro, allá, del, de entiendo.
Words that aren't just filler, but signal active listening, agreement, understanding, connection.
Precisely. They function less as information carriers and more as relational glue. They build the bridge, show you're engaged, validate the other person. Because he lacked these empathy markers in his fluent English, his interactions felt colder, more like a monologue than a dialogue.
So an empathy gap created by a lack of performance of active listening signals. He wasn't showing he understood.
Exactly. His strategy, once he identified this, was immediate and very deliberate. First, he researched and made a list of the common English conversational connectors and back-channeling cues.
Things like,
Right. Okay, I see. Got it. That makes sense. Uh-huh. And importantly, clarifying phrases like, so if I'm understanding you correctly, or let me make sure I've got this right.
and then, just knowing them isn't enough?
No. He made it a non-negotiable rule for himself in all client interactions. Talk significantly less. Maybe aim for 40% talking, 60% listening. And consciously, actively pepper his listening with these connector phrases. Not just randomly, but timed appropriately to genuinely show he was processing and validating what the client was saying.
So he was fixing his performance of listening to allow his naturally empathetic identity to come through in English.
That's it, exactly. He realigned his English performance with his core professional identity.
Okay, those case studies are brilliant. They really show how identifying the specific limit unlocks the right strategy. Anya needed rhetoric, Kenji needed improv and analysis, Chloe needed structure, Diego needed listening markers.
Exactly. Diagnosis dictates treatment.
So now let's equip the listener. We've done the diagnosis, we've seen the examples. What's the actionable toolkit? How do we systematically start pushing back on these frontiers ourselves, starting today?
Right. Let's move from the what and why to the how. We need to structure the tools to directly address those three frontiers we identified: knowledge, performance, and identity. It's about moving from general practice to targeted, almost surgical intervention.
Okay, tool #1, tackling the knowledge gaps.
At the C1 level, just reading random articles or learning vocabulary lists isn't efficient enough. It's too scattered. We need to move to thematic challenge pods.
Challenge pods, explain that.
Think of it like creating a mini immersion course focused only on a specific area where your topic storm challenge revealed a major weakness.
Okay, so let's say my topic storm showed I completely froze when asked about international diplomacy and negotiation. I sounded like a child. That's my knowledge gap. How do I build a formal negotiation pod?
Good example. A challenge pod needs to be dense and multimodal. It needs three core components. First, High-quality, challenging input material on that specific topic.
So for negotiation.
Watch a UN Security Council debate online. Read the negotiation analysis section in The Economist or Foreign Affairs. Listen to a podcast series on international relations or conflict resolution. Immerse yourself in the real language of that domain.
Okay, input secured. Component 2.
Targeted lexical acquisition. Don't just hope you absorb words. Actively extract the key vocabulary and phrasing specific to that domain. For negotiation, find maybe 10-15 core idioms and collocations related to conflict, compromise, and agreement.
Like find common ground, a sticking point, leverage, make concessions, a non-starter, a zero-sum game.
Exactly those kinds of phrases. Learn them actively. And crucially, focus on the formal register associated with them.
Got it. Input, lexicon. What's the third essential part?
Targeted output. You must activate this new knowledge immediately. The practice needs to directly mirror the target skill.
So for my negotiation pod.
You role-play a formal negotiation scenario with a partner, maybe using a case study you read about, or you write a formal diplomatic memo or a letter outlining a negotiating position, making sure you force yourself to use the new vocabulary and formal structures you just learned.
So the pod creates this focused cycle. Input, extract, activate.
Precisely. You build these dense, targeted pods for every major knowledge gap you identify. A pod for explaining technical concepts simply, a pod for discussing contemporary art, a pod for debating ethical dilemmas. Deep dives, not shallow skimming.
I like that. Focused intensity. Okay, tool, #2. What about the performance gaps? The knowing-doing problem?
This is where we tackle those ingrained errors, the fossilized mistakes, and that gap between passive and active vocabulary that your transcript analysis revealed. We need deliberate drilling.
Drilling sounds repetitive, maybe boring.
It can be, but it's about targeted high-intensity practice focused only on the specific error you identified. It's like physiotherapy for your language muscles, rewiring those faulty neural pathways.
Okay, give me an example. Let's take that common issue the source mentioned. Overusing weak intensifiers like very, plus an adjective, very good, very interesting, very hard. My transcript shows I do this constantly. What's the drill?
The drill requires discipline, but it's simple in concept. For a set period, say, 1 full week, you completely forbid yourself from using the word very in any speaking or writing.
Cold turkey.
Cold turkey on very. Then you actively prepare. Make a list of, say, 10 common adjectives you tend to modify with very, good, sad, big, tired, important. For each one, find and learn 3 stronger, more precise synonyms.
So instead of very good, I practice using excellent, outstanding, superb, instead of very sad, somber, melancholy, heartbroken.
Exactly. By banning the weak word and preloading stronger alternatives, you force your brain under the pressure of real-time communication to access and deploy that richer vocabulary. You're moving words from passive recognition to active recall.
Okay, that tackles lexical performance. What about drilling for phonology? That stubborn sheep problem, the phi versus I sound.
For pronunciation, it's about consistent, focused, low-dose, high-repetition practice. You need minimal pair drilling.
Minimal pairs, words that differ by only one sound.
Right. So you find lists of minimal pairs targeting your specific problem sound. Ship, sheep, bin, bean, sit, seat, live, leave. You spend just 5 minutes every single day working with these pairs. Use a pronunciation app that gives feedback, work with a tutor, or record yourself.
What's the goal of the 5 minutes?
The goal is to train your ear to clearly hear the difference, and more importantly, train your mouth muscles to consistently produce the difference. You listen, you repeat, you record, you listen back. Repeat until the distinction is clear and automatic, not just when you're concentrating, but always. It's pure muscle memory training for your tongue and lips.
Attacking the physical production of the sound.
Exactly. And for grammar, the same principle applies. Don't just vaguely study grammar. Use your transcript. If it shows you consistently mess up articles,
My drill isn't reading a grammar book chapter on articles.
No. Your drill is maybe writing 20 targeted sentences each day where the only challenge is choosing the correct article, or doing focused online exercises specifically on article usage. It's about isolating the single error and hitting it with high repetitions until the correct form becomes automatic. Precision and intensity over broad, shallow practice.
Surgical strikes on specific errors. Got it. Okay, final frontier. The identity gap.
Yeah.
How do we practice being more ourselves?
This is the most nuanced, so the practice needs to reflect that. Since the identity gap is about expressing your personality, connecting socially, and projecting your intended persona, the practice needs to focus on social dynamics and performance, not just grammatical accuracy. We need strategic role play.
Role play. Okay. But it needs to feel safe enough to experiment, right?
Absolutely. This is best done with a trusted language partner, a tutor, or maybe a small supportive practice group. The key is creating a space where you can try on different aspects of your desired English identity without high stakes.
Let's take an example. Say my social benchmarking revealed I'm a good storyteller in my native language, but my English identity gap makes me sound flat and factual. My goal, be more charismatic and engaging when telling stories. How do I role play that?
You practice telling a personal story or anecdote, something simple, maybe about your weekend. But here's the crucial part. The feedback you ask for is not about grammar or vocabulary.
What do I ask for feedback on?
You explicitly ask, how engaging was that? Was my tone varied and dynamic? Did I use pauses effectively? Was my body language open? Did I make good eye contact, even on video? Did the story flow well or did it drag? You are focusing entirely on the performance of charisma, the delivery, the connection.
Training the emotional and performative aspects of communication, not just the linguistic code.
Exactly. Shifting the focus from correctness to impact. Another common goal. Be more assertive without sounding aggressive. Maybe your disagreement analysis showed you back down too easily or sound unintentionally harsh in English.
How do we practice assertiveness safely?
Set up a role play where your partner deliberately disagrees with you on a minor, low-stakes issue. Something trivial, the best way to make coffee, the merits of a particular movie.
Why low stakes?
It lowers the emotional temperature. It prevents you from getting genuinely angry or defensive, allowing you to focus purely on the language of assertiveness. Your task is to practice defending your maybe arbitrary position using pre-prepared but adaptable phrases.
Phrases like,
Polite but firm structures. I understand your point, however. I see it differently because I respect your perspective, but my view is that. From my experience, the better approach is. I'm afraid I can't agree with that particular point, as you practice delivering these calmly and confidently, holding your ground linguistically.
so you're building the verbal toolkit and the confidence to deploy it, ready for when the stakes are higher.
Exactly. You're ensuring your English allows you to express conviction clearly and appropriately, aligning your English self with your confident native self. You're training the language needed to stand your ground effectively. Hashtag outro.
This has been incredibly insightful. So the journey for the C1 learner, it really isn't about reaching some mythical finish line called perfect fluency, is it?
Not at all. It's much more like a lifelong expedition, a continuous process of exploration. The real goal isn't perfection. It's becoming a skilled, systematic, and maybe most importantly, fearless cartographer of your own evolving language abilities.
A map maker of your own limits. I like that.
So we really want to encourage you, the listener, start embracing those awkward moments, that pause where you searched for a word, that joke that didn't quite land, that argument where you felt you couldn't quite express yourself.
Don't see them as signs you're failing or not good enough.
See them as data, pure and simple. They are the precise coordinates showing you where your next growth opportunity lies. They are not failures. They are navigational beacons.
So wrapping this up, what's the big takeaway for the advanced learner listening right now?
I think it's this. The true measure of your progress, your fluency development at this stage, isn't how well you manage to hide or avoid your limitations.
It's how courageously you seek them out.
Yes, how bravely you face them and how systematically and diligently you work to push them back, using targeted strategies like the ones we've discussed.
That map of your own limitations, the one you draw by finding these gaps.
It turns out to be the most valuable treasure map you'll ever possess. It doesn't lead to a single pot of gold called perfect English.
It leads to something better.
It leads to a lifetime of richer, deeper, more nuanced, and ultimately more authentic communication in English, a way to truly express more of who you are.
So the call to action is clear. Start drawing your map today. Record yourself, analyze your errors, embrace the discomfort. Turn those failures into your strategic blueprint for growth.